Good evening, everyone, and what a fantastic crowd, and welcome to the theatre tonight for our City Talk. And I'd like to very warmly welcome our keynote speaker, Chris Anderson, and all our panel members. We've got a terrific lineup tonight. There was an article in a recent Good Weekend which quoted Adrian Turner, the founder of the Australian startup IT security business. He said, and I quote, "Australia is a lucky country sitting on all these natural resources, but it needs to export more than just commodities and booze." And I agree. Australia's export boom has come on the back of mining across the country, but inner city Sydney's financial contribution is up there with the mining industry. We need to look at how Australia will ensure its long-term financial sustainability. How do we create an environment for innovation in Sydney? And how do we nurture those start-up projects and businesses to create the mid-sized and the larger businesses of the future? That's the question we're putting to the panel tonight. I know that there are a lot of people involved in creative or technology startup projects in Sydney here tonight, and I welcome you. There is so much happening. In the past 5 to 10 years, Sydney's shown a startling capacity for bringing groups of passionate people together on great projects. Big or soon-to-be big successes like Atlassian, 99 Dresses, Shoes of Prey, Romance Was Born, The Spreets, and startup businesses like Pig and Rouse Phillips, mmmeal.com and Uncommon Ground are just some. Aren't they fantastic names? We're seeing the results in the media too, with FBI Radio, inthemix.com.au and the Global Mail, among a cast of new entrants over the past decade. At the other end of the scale, we have groundbreaking research in our universities, as well as companies like Google producing some of their most original projects out of their Sydney headquarters. This has all been fuelled by lots of talent, a generally optimistic outlook, empty warehouses, mobile and internet access, and a spirit of collaboration and openness. On any given morning, groups link up on Twitter and meet up in cafes throughout the city to trade ideas, to share experiences, and to link up on projects. There are now so many public talks: Fast Break, Beers and Ideas, IF Talks, Green Ups, and at the other end of the scale, TEDx Sydney, which of course many of you probably attended at the weekend, thanks to Chris, and there's Interesting South, there's Creative Sydney, there's Festival of Dangerous Ideas, and our own City Talks, which you come to. In fact, on any given night, there will be multiple options for people to go out and be inspired. It's boosting the natural well of talent Sydney draws from, with a strongly do-it-yourself ethos, bringing people together on projects before they move on to others. So why do people start these kinds of innovative projects here, and how can we nurture them on their way further down the track? Our research tells us people set up businesses and choose to work in Sydney for many of the same reasons that they choose to live here. That's one of the big reasons why our long-term Sustainable Sydney 2030 plan is important. It was Sydney's biggest ever community consultation, and the result on a large scale of the kind of debate and collaboration happening in smart cities across the world, in neighbourhoods and in discussion groups, in talks and in debates. We asked people who live, work and visit the city what kind of Sydney they wanted. We work with residents, with big and small businesses, with other levels of government, with universities, with cultural institutions. We brought in some of Sydney's and the world's most creative thinkers, and our own staff were fired with enthusiasm. People told us they wanted Sydney to take the initiatives on tackling climate change. They wanted a globally competitive and innovative city. They wanted it to work more efficiently with integrated transport and a much better environment for walking and cycling around the city. They also wanted a livelier city centre, and they wanted thriving local villages. A big part of innovation is coming up with ideas and putting them into practice, such as our locally generated Tri-Gen network of low-carbon zones taking the city off the coal-powered network. Here at the city, we do the research, we consult, and then we deliver. We're well on the way to meeting our 2030 targets across all of our areas, and I think the thing that makes Sydney a great place to live is equally the kind of things that attract people to move here for work and to set up business. That's, of course, on top of our Sydney's natural beauty. So there's a lot to attract people here. So once they're in Sydney, how do we encourage people to start great projects and stick with them? Part of it's not getting in the way. Across the board, we're looking at ways to reduce red tape. And in the meantime, we're running a series of 101 sessions for would-be entrepreneurs, taking them step by step through the process of setting up small bars, food trucks and other businesses. But many startups do need help. They need affordable space, they need advice, they need encouragement and financial support. One of the biggest challenges for startup businesses in Sydney is serious financial support. For businesses with the potential to become global players, that can mean funding in the vicinity of $100,000 to $1 million. The people with that kind of money to spend are putting it into property, into mining and to exploration. We need to start redirecting some of that money into our local talent, as well as encouraging the government to look at tax incentives so we can help innovative small businesses grow into the mid-size or larger businesses of Sydney's future. Recently, I hosted the Australian launch of Springboard. That's a program to help women entrepreneurs link up with angel investors, with CEOs, with lawyers, with accountants, and women from chambers of commerce, universities and government. Basically, what they need is to get their ideas off the ground. And I'm going to ask our CEO, she doesn't know this yet, but to look at ways the city could act as a broker or blind date some of these venture capitalists with startups. A year ago, I asked Council to run a trial using city properties on Oxford Street as affordable workspaces for creative projects. The idea was to incubate some of these great startups. We received well over 200 applications for spaces in our 66 Oxford Street property. 16 tenants moved in at the beginning of the year, including web startup aroundyou.com.au, textile design house Rouse Phillip, the shopfront gallery space Platform 72, and 2 co-working spaces, Homework and Fishburners. People started collaborating almost as soon as they moved in. It was quite remarkable to walk around the building and hear their stories. And next week, the tenants will put on their first Talks and Networking Night. And you can find it on Twitter at 66 Meetups. A huge challenge for Sydney's emerging entrepreneurs is that of paying for accommodation because it's just too expensive to risk failing. That's where these kind of spaces come in. They give artists and creative startups a space where they can risk failing. We're now working our way through expressions of interest for another, in fact, larger property on William Street. And as well as that, we have a program of community grants for creative and community projects. I think this is one of the most important things we can do for our creative and cultural city. We're also investing in a huge range of cultural and creative events around the city, from the Sydney Festival's fantastic first night in the Biennale, and I think no one can forget the wonderful Russian Pavilion at the Cockatoo Islands, the last Biennale. And of course there's the Sydney Film Festival, and that opens next week. Our Art and About Festival takes art out of the galleries, creating surprising, wonderful moments around the city in September. It's a festival that complements our approach to opening up inner city laneways as spaces for innovation, with public art and opportunities for people to open small bars and galleries and intriguing shops and enjoy exploring the city. Much of our work is like that, integrated across our projects. We aim for beautiful, excellent design that's water, energy and waste efficient and useful for the community. The city's investment in Sydney's creative culture, $23 million in the last financial year, is being made through planning, properties, parks, events and public spaces. That means it has plenty of momentum, and the Council has asked our CEO to bring all this work together in a cultural policy for the city. That's a broad brief, because when you try to pin down the differences between inspiring people creatively and encouraging them to start up innovation, it's not easy to find the line. Over the coming months, we'll be doing workshops, surveys and vox pops. We'll be doing plenty of research, we'll be running deep community consultation, and we'll be asking what kind of creative culture we want in Sydney. Tonight's discussion is an opening salvo in that public debate. I'm so glad you're all here. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So thank you to you. Thank you, Lord Mayor, for your welcome. I have to say, those graphics would have graced any TED Talk. I did not expect that. But I guess I should have, because every moment here has been proof positive that this city is absolutely teeming with ideas. The world of ideas is really live and well here. So I guess it's a great place for us to talk about one of the most important of them all. What is the future city going to be? I don't think there actually is a more important question facing humanity. The speed at which we're urbanizing is astonishing. It's 1 million people a week, every week, are moving into cities. People expect that that's going to be continuing for the next 70 years. So let's see. Right now, there are about 3.5 billion of our 7 billion people are in cities. In 50, 60, 70 years, it's going to be about 7 billion out of 9 or 10. Effectively, we have to, in that period of time, recreate as much urban living space as all of humanity has in all of our history. You might think that's a slightly terrifying prospect. It certainly used to terrify me. I was really influenced 30, 40 years ago by E.F. Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful, where he argued that urbanization was the curse. It was humanity's curse, that we were both depleting villages across the planet and poisoning cities at the same time. And I certainly felt that a long time, and then I came to TED, and over the last 10 years, my opinion on this has been completely turned upside down by speakers like this. I actually now believe completely the opposite. I think that urbanization is going to save humanity, and I want to talk about why I think that might be. I mean, we'll start with Rob Neurath here, who changed completely the way I thought about slums. I grew up in Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, and when I went to some of the worst places of some of the cities in that part of the world, I found them stressful places. I couldn't wait to get out. They seemed dangerous, they seemed stinky, they seemed awful, hellish. Rob Neurath had me think about them in a different way. I mean, for one thing, if you actually ask people who live in some of these slums whether they'd like to go back to the villages that they came from, they would typically say no. And when you actually looked at what was happening there, you saw that this proximity, this crush of humanity was prompting massive innovation, markets everywhere, people inventing thousands and thousands of different ways to maybe one day escape out of poverty. Ed Glazer, in his book, The Triumph of the City, says, great cities don't create poverty, but what they do is they attract a lot of poor people, and they give them a path out of poverty. Well, that was an interesting way to think of it. And it's true that cities have played this role throughout history by bringing people together. That is how innovation happens. It doesn't pop out of the idea of a single person. It happens when ideas collide. Were it not for the coffee houses of European cities of the 1700s, the scientific revolution probably would never have happened. So that was one piece of the puzzle. And then there was this little matter about the population miracle. When I grew up, I was terrified by the coming population bomb. It really looked like the graph was going like this, it would never stop, and the world would blow up, and billions of people would perish from hunger. I think we all grew up with that story. It's really a miracle that's happened in the last decade, I guess, where it's become clear that population, global population, is probably going to stabilize around about 9 or 10 billion people. Why? Many reasons, but number one on the list is probably urbanization. In the village, an extra kid is an asset, helps work the farm. In a crowded city, not so much. And in crowded cities, women have access to healthcare more likely. They have access to education more likely. And these things combine to have this spectacular reduction in family size from 6 or 7 down to 2 or 3. That's been the magic bullet that has given us hope that we actually could get to a sustainable number of people on planet Earth. And then I learned from Stuart Brand that there's an underreported story out there that in parts of our planet, forests are actually regrowing. Why? Urbanization. As villages are emptying out, nature can reclaim some of the space that humanity has abandoned. So you put those pieces together, regrowing forests, population under control, economic opportunity, and one other big one, sustainability. It was a real surprise to me to learn that New York City, this place that I thought of, kind of associated with crowds of people, bustle, commerce, piles of garbage everywhere, it turns out that it's one of the greenest places in America. I was looking at the Lazard numbers this morning on carbon footprint per person. Here in Sydney, it's about 20 tons of CO2 per person per year, according to their numbers, which is about the same as what it is across most of America. It's a huge amount of carbon dioxide, not a sustainable number, actually. In New York, the number's half that, 10 per person, because, well, people live on top of each other. They heat each other. They don't have cars. They walk to work in many cases. And because it's expensive, people settle for smaller living spaces. But the upside is that everywhere you walk in the city, there's amazing things happening. There's culture, shops, restaurants at every corner. And people absolutely adore New York City. Who knew? So you put these pieces together, and suddenly you think of this urbanization project in a different way. That maybe this is how humanity can reorganize itself in a way to actually be sustainable. You can actually picture a planet with 9 billion people on it that is sustainable for the long term. There actually is enough room on Earth, believe it or not. If you gave every family on Earth an acre of space, they could actually fit into Australia. I'm not suggesting that as a public policy, but that's how the math works out. And so all of these things got us at TED very excited and dreaming about what we could do to take the city story forward. And there was one other piece. All of us have been so frustrated watching national governments lock up, unable to make big decisions about our shared future. You know, it's a tragedy for sure. But look at the world at city level and take into account the fact that 2/3 of humanity soon is going to be living in cities. And then realize that at city level, things can get done. You've just heard an inspiring speech from your own Lord Mayor. This is actually really, really exciting. And so we thought at TED this year that we would give our annual prize, not to a person, but to an idea, City 2.0. This is the idea of what cities could be. Every city in the world has its own 2.0 version. And the point about 2.0 is that it's going to be invented not top-down, ultimately. It's going to be invented by you, by the citizens of each city. This is where the ideas will bubble up from. And we wanted to create a platform where change wouldn't happen just in one city, but because we're in a world where ideas spread across the world at the speed of light, that the best ideas in one city could leak out into another. How thrilling would that be? So to prepare for this talk, I did an experiment. I wrote to some of our TEDx organizers in the cities around the world. There are actually thousands of them. And I said to them, what is one thing that you love about your own city? Take a picture of it and write me a couple of sentences about it. And this is some of what they said. So in Cape Town, there's a project called Trash Bag, in which kids are incented to help clean up their communities. Rewards for rubbish. So they learn to care for nature and connect with each other and clean up the city. This is an amazing picture. We think of Singapore as this bustling center of commerce and finance, huge buildings, skyscrapers. This is the picture on a satellite. It's green. Every road is lined with trees. Huge numbers. There are hundreds of areas devoted to parks and nature reserves. And so despite economic growth, even in the last few years, the percentage of green is increasing from 36% in 1986 to nearly 50% today, as you can see. As our organizer there, David Lynn said, life is just more pleasant and relaxing as a result. And as economic growth continues, we are using even more innovative ways to improve our living environments, such as vertical gardens, green walls, sky gardens. Chiang Mai. a city beloved by artists and designers and tourists who come to participate in that culture, nurtured by art shows like this, street festivals. In Warsaw, they tried a project where they put out 15 of these benches which celebrate the music of Frédéric Chopin, a Warsaw citizen. As our organizer there said, it's a simple idea that gives daily joy and inspiration to hundreds of people. In Baltimore, students are helping bridge the digital divide by having these hackathon events. As our organizer said, you come to this, you work on projects for nonprofits around the city. It's a competition, but everyone walks away a winner. In Ghent, they have a light plan so that the tougher neighborhoods of the city can become worth visiting at night. Here in Wollongong, allegedly, this is the place where they are pursuing the holy grail of medicine, spinal cord repair. This is at the University of Wollongong's Innovation Campus. Now here's a surprising scene. This is in one of the world's most violent cities. And what do you see? People strolling around in comfort. It's kind of how cities are meant to be, right? Walking around, buying a coffee, picking up a newspaper. A volunteer group decided to take a small part of the city, pay to close it down from traffic, put in cameras, put in lighting, hire extra security, and make just a few blocks of the city safe. It's working. And so that experience can spread out block by block, citizens taking action. It's the famous jazz festival in Brussels where they're so proud of all the parades, interventions, cultural experiences, all-night museum openings, children's film festivals, African fashion shows, etc. Hong Kong. Our organizer was just so inspired by the spirit of volunteerism there. 7 million people in the city, the number of volunteers, 1 million. In Quebec, our organizer said, you know, it's a wonderful city. It's 400 years old, but it's got these really ugly grain silos destroying the skyline. So we transform them. We project onto them. The power of projection, you've seen it here in Sydney this week. It was just amazing walking around the harbour here. In Honolulu, people are helping other people grow food in their own backyards, balconies, wherever. Mexico has been revitalizing its public spaces, creating cultural corridors, renovating plazas, making certain central streets car-free. Little public art in Breda, I have no idea what that is. Marathon in Fargo, city marathons, as you know, just really bring out the best in a city in a spectacular way. Islamabad, a city with a lot of things to worry about, and people who are so proud of the spectacular architecture that they have there. In Daejeon, they have a technology cluster of 87 government research institutes, and this was a festival to celebrate art-science convergence. They did it in style. Ho Chi Minh, again, this idea of just gathering and sitting and enjoying, as our organizer said, at this green area, lives from rich to poor are treated the same. Just sit down and enjoy. And finally, in Christchurch, New Zealand, another tale of volunteerism. Thousands of university students turn up, clean up, pitch in, help out. They're organizing a concert for 10,000 kids. You can only attend if you volunteer. So look, as you can see, and as you know, people are so passionate about cities and about their city's future, and there are so many ways to make a great city. But I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the future of the world depends on what type of city is chosen by the emerging, rapidly emerging middle classes of China, India, Asia, Africa. If they pick suburbia, big house, a life built around driving a car, we're screwed. I'm serious, all of us. I think we know that. That's kind of the lifestyle that most of us have chosen in the West, and there's great things about it. Maybe there's some bad things about it, a little bit of alienation perhaps for some people who lost a sense of community out there. Is there another picture of the city that might actually persuade a family with young kids growing up that they wanted to stay, they wanted to live there in the city and be part of it, and enjoy a life that wasn't based so much on cars? It was based on walking and cycling and connecting and other forms of innovative transport, like some of the ones that you're dreaming up here in Sydney. What would that city look like? It just seems to me such an urgent design project for the world's designers, architects, urban planners, dreamers, poets, authors, storytellers, to figure this one out. Here is one TED Talk that really got into my head and that I love. This is the architect, Thomas Heatherwick, who was trying to figure out what vertical living could be like. Because vertical living, in many ways, has so many of the answers. People can stay together and walk and so forth, but for many people, it feels like you're in a rat trap. Arguably, some of the architects of the last century kind of forgot that humans don't necessarily just want to be in a box jammed together. So Thomas Heatherwick realized that you could, using today's construction techniques, do buildings of a different shape that had high proximity living in the air, and at ground level, you saved it for nature. This is, I think, going to be built in Kuala Lumpur. I looked at this image, and I just had one thought. I wish I was born in the future. So what you're doing with Sydney 2030 could not be a more important project. The ideas you come up with aren't just going to influence your own future here. They're going to leak out across the rest of the world. They're going to help determine what choices the rest of the world makes about lives that they dream about. Because when we think about the city of the future, we're really not just thinking about nicer homes and a bit more culture and a kind of better life. We're dreaming of a future that our children can flourish in. We're dreaming about the possibility of economic opportunity for all. We're dreaming about rethinking the world so that it's not 9 billion coming hungry mouths that are going to munch up our planet. It's going to be 9 billion connected, empowered, learning minds who are able to reinvent a more beautiful future like this. We're dreaming about the possibility that humanity, instead of spreading over every inch of this planet and crowding out every other species, isn't going to do that. It's going to organize itself brilliantly into these connected, cleverly constructed, beautiful, green, light, nature-infused, culture-infused places that are teeming with energy and excitement and possibility. So, you're going to do that. I'm going to be watching. I promise I will do all I can to take what you do to the world, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. Thank you so much.